Stay strong, keep your faith alive. Whatever comes to meet us, know the darkness won't defeat us. Stay strong and keep your faith alive. Some say the end is coming, to set our souls running, but I say, stay strong and keep your faith alive. Let's all come together, take care of each other. Stay strong and keep your faith alive.
As I articulated in the first class, transpersonal psychology says the pain that you're in is not psychological, is not biographical, but has to do with a disconnect from being, and that practices that facilitate a deeper connection and ultimately a constant communion with being have the power to bring you a liberation in this moment. That as well as in the long run, a bigger picture of liberation. Somatic psychology, a psychology which really understands the role of the body in our well-being and really understands the body as a screen where we carry our experience. Do you hear that? The body as a vehicle where we carry our experience rather than the mind or the emotion. We work with the body and its holding of experience. In this case, we're talking about holding of traumatic experience. And the founder of that is really Wilhelm Reich, who in the Reich was a direct descendant of Freud, who rebelled against Freud. And Reich in the 1930s was working with clients in their underwear so that he could see their muscles and watch their breathing and feel their emotional armoring, feel their body armoring.
Didn't he go to jail for that?
No. Well, he really interesting. You want to read a great biography. He championed the sexual freedom wing of the Communist Party. And in Germany, it was one of the most popular elements of the Communist Party during that time. But then when the Bolsheviks came in, they shut him down. They didn't want to have anything to do. Their communism wasn't about sexual freedom. And he was kicked out of Germany. He went to Scandinavia, where it was very scandalous, kicked out of a couple of Scandinavian countries for working with his clients in their underwear. And, ultimately, his theme is all our neurosis is caused by not having a good orgasm. And he was so committed to his work that he would often help his clients to have a good orgasm.
Oh dear.
But he came to the United States. It was a country that promised you freedom. And he had these orgone devices, boxes of copper and other layers of material that would concentrate your life force. And the Food and Drug Administration went after him for practicing medicine without a license because he had all sorts of claims for the orgone boxes. He didn't believe that in America, this land of freedom, they would try to put him in jail for his orgone boxes. So he didn't show up in court, and the judge threw the book at him. He ended up in jail, in prison, a serious federal rap, and he ended up dying in prison, and a very painful death, so indignant that here in this land of freedom, he could be persecuted for believing in life force and trying to heal people through the use of life force. So that's the witch who started our tradition in a sense, Now the work that we're doing, the word somatics comes from the work of Thomas Hanna, who is a... Pardon?
As you like.
We could do that, but many of you don't wear underwear, so we won't keep this. So this work, the word somatic comes from the brilliant work of Dr. Thomas Hanna, was a philosopher who ended up creating the Saybrook Institute in Marin County, in Sonoma County. And in the 1960s, developed a whole school of mind-body therapy and published a magazine to promulgate that. So you can still find his somatics books of movement in bookstores. Occasionally you'll find, if you're interested in that. Now, the next thinker that we're interested here is Dr. Eugene Genlin. And what Freud did for pansexuality, or what Freud did for the subconscious, Genlin did for somatics. And he's responsible for a fundamental turning point in the effectiveness of psychology. Today, psychology is really dominated by somatic approaches, just really emerging. It's really what's happening. And he's the one. In the late 50s, he had a huge research grant to study why it was so rare that psychotherapy was effective. Okay? And they studied all sorts of schools of psychotherapy. They had hard love therapists, they had inexperienced therapists, all sorts of therapists, all sorts of therapy, and they taped the sessions. And what they found, that the school of your psychotherapist, the training, the approach, the skill had nothing to do with the effectiveness of psychotherapy. And they gave these people, standard tests before, during, after. They asked these people, did this help you? Did it give you any benefit? Did it give you lasting benefit? And what they found was that people who got help and got lasting benefit, it wasn't what their therapist was doing, it's what they did in the context of that session. That these were people who went into their bodies. They didn't just tell a story from their mind, but they went into their bodies and they groped inside their bodily experience for what they were actually experiencing in the energy, in the tissue, in the sensations of their body. It was so easy that an undergraduate could watch these tapes or listen to these tapes and tell you this person's going to succeed and get lasting and valuable benefit. They could, it's so easy to spot the people who were doing this. So he created a system of psychotherapy without psychotherapists called focusing. And he was elected president of the American Humanistic Psychology Association. He was awarded numerous awards. Some people consider him the most important American philosopher of the 20th century for his contribution to psychology. Can you imagine? Psychology is such a profound failure. I don't mean, counseling, which can be really valuable, but psychotherapy is you can talk until you run out of money.
That's the idea.
Okay. You can have a wonderful relationship with your therapist, but it's very uncommon for people to get, a breakthrough, or many approaches, few arrivals. And the second important thinker that really contributes to this is Dr. Peter Levine. And Levine has 2 PhDs, one in psychology, but one in the physics of the nervous system, biological physics and the physics of the nervous system, and just how we as mammals hold trauma, okay? This is what he was interested in, how we as mammals hold trauma. And I'd throw Dr. Stone in there too, actually, but we're not going there right now. Okay, where are my 3 brains at? And so what we come to understand through Dr. Levine's work is that, first of all, we're mammals. We are, how old are we? 150 million? No, we've been hanging out for 500 million years as mammals. And our mammalian nervous system has been developing over 500 million years. We have a lot more in common with that iguana than we do with each other as a nervous system. That iguana has been in the food chain for, let's say, 500 million years, trying to make sure a boa constrictor doesn't catch up with them.
It's not working. It's like psychotherapy. It's not successful.
Well, he's playing the odds, just like psychotherapy. And if I like to take the example of a lizard, and that lizard has to react like that, or he's in the food chain. And so we have that nervous system that is basically a nervous system that's designed into two modes. Parasympathetic, where all the energy comes into the core, where a lizard's lying in the sun, digesting and nourishing our body. We sense something in our field, and instantly the body shuts down every function. And all the energy goes in the periphery, ready to flee, and often just flees immediately. Do you hear how instantly that chameleon responds to a threat? We have that same nervous system, otherwise we would have been eaten a few 100 million years ago. Okay. So where we hold our response to a threat is hundreds of millions of years older than the neocortex, where we think about things. If that lizard thinks about things, he's cat food. And the limbic system and the emotional brains only appears 150 million years ago. So for 350 million years we were surviving before we became emotional beings. And again, if that lizard reacts emotionally, he's cat food as well. So our response to trauma is in a level that's not on the brain, which, as we talked about yesterday, the neocortex, and cognitive processes, which have no direct relationship to experience. They all go through the senses and a very sophisticated neurological and cognitive process. And it has no relationship to the instinctual, to the emotional brain either. But that where the body holds its experience of trauma and threat is in this reptilian brain, which is throughout the body. And again, the body has a direct experience of the world. That in every moment, your body is feeling the world independently of your senses. And in every moment, your body is grokking the world and responding to the world and has a memory of every situation. We sometimes tap into it like on a menu. We what should I order here? Where you go into your gut feeling. Or maybe we checked into a hotel a few weeks ago and we immediately wanted to get out of there. We went and said, hey, we don't want to stay here, and just from a gut feeling that both of us had. So Genlin labeled this level of knowing, again, it's a level sui generis, unto itself, okay? A totally new concept, a totally new way of understanding psychology. He labeled it the felt sense, okay? And Genlin says the felt sense is a special kind of internal bodily awareness. It forms as you give your attention to experience. It's not a mental experience, it's physical. It's a body sense of a particular situation, person, event, or circumstance. You hear that? It's the body's sense. It's the way the body holds experience. It's made of many interwoven strands, though it's felt as one. It's not an emotion. It's the body's sense of meaning. It's how the body holds and responds to something. It's the body wisdom related to some aspect of your life and how it's going. Now, what we've come to understand here is we're using this evolutionary model of trauma, which I've developed, in which the ancient wisdom says your dharma is to be present in your experience. Trauma overwhelms the body, and the body shuts down to that presence. That trauma is a place we were unwilling, this fragile ego, this fragile and vulnerable and profoundly sensitive ego was unable to be present in the bodily experience, was overwhelmed by that experience. And that's what we're labeling as trauma. And then what we're saying is presence is the healer. All we need to do to heal trauma is to be willing to experience that it's safe to be present in the body. You don't have to experience the trauma. You don't have to experience the emotions. You don't have to experience the story. We're not going to be working on a cognitive level. We're going to be working with the body's own language. The body has a direct access to experience, not like the mind. The mind has no direct access to reality, or the emotions, which have no direct access to reality. They're all highly interpretive, complicated neurological process. But the body, and so the body's language is sensation. That hardness, that tension, that contraction, that dis-ease, that shakiness, that pulling back. Okay, this is what we call the felt sense. Now we have a felt sense about everything in our life because the body's always experiencing and reacting. I like to call it, we have different postures, like you're with your mother and you have a posture based on your relationship to her and your dynamics. You move to your girlfriend, you're in a much different posture. There's much more freedom. There's much more space there. Move to your father and you're in do you hear the different postures? You go to work in this fear-driven job. You go to your satsang, joyous, dear, loving friends. So you see, and they're all states of bodily being based on bodily experience. So the body has a way of holding its experience, which is not mental, not emotional, unique to the body, which is expressed in states of bodily tension, bodily well-being. These are the kind of things you try to talk to your doctor about for years, and he thinks you're crazy. All these subtle things that you're aware of psychically, physically, all these qualitative things in your sentience. A lot of you can feel the cellular and molecular level of what's going on in your body and experience the world on that level. And there's nowhere in the linear mind for that kind of experience. So we have, and then we have Dr. Levine telling us the same sort of thing. Brings together a great deal of disparate data, translated in a meaningful and unified manner. It's the medium through which we experience the totality. It's the gestalt of blending together everything that forms your experience in a situation. Even when you're not consciously aware of it, the felt sense is telling you where you are and how you feel in any given moment. Your comfort or discomfort, that gut feeling, is always there in the body's experience. It's the experience of being in the body that understands the nuances of its environment by way of its response to that environment. It understands the nuances in the environment by way of its response to the environment. Now, this is a lot easier than it sounds. All we're going to do is ask you to lie on the table, being held in sacred space, someone cradling you with compassion and kindness and safety. And we're just inviting you to start experiencing the sensations, the energy in your body, And we're going to be facilitating the space that it's safe to be present in your body. And that, without any drama, without any tears, without any story, will be releasing past trauma. Yes, please, Anton.
Just trying to fine-tune that felt sense definition. Would you separate the physical sensation? So, for example, we just had a snack, and so I have a physical sensation of my digestive system working, versus the gut feeling that you talked about earlier, which physically is also located here, but is not. That's a different feeling.
Well, we don't judge as a practitioner whatever the client reports as their experience. We're teaching a technique called sensation-based awareness. We're essentially educators or facilitators. You know, we're not psychotherapists, we're not counselors, we're not treating any form of disease. We're educators.
According to, let's say, Levine or the previous person.
What is the more because again, well, okay, because what may be involved, okay, so most people with stomach problems, that stomach is rooted in toxicity in their environment growing up, that their parents were fighting, or they had a huge family where there's too rejasic, much excitement, the environment was emotionally toxic, you know, I've seen families where when the child sits down at a table, that's a chance for the mother to really get him right there and, you know, and grill him. You know what I mean? It's a place where here's the child sitting down, eating, you know, where the mother can really get into the child. And yeah. So for a lot of people, eating, which should be a safe and nourishing space, can... So I had a very, very thin young man come to me, and he hadn't been able to digest food for decades. And we did this work, and it turns out that his sympathetic nervous system was so activated that there was no parasympathetic. There was only fight or flight. And it turns out that his mother was an alcoholic, and every meal was a hell realm. And his inability to digest had to do with every moment trying to escape the hell of that interaction. Now, I just kind of caricature that because in many families, sitting down at a meal is water chakra. It should be what connects us and nourishes us, ultimately is love. But there's a lot of family dynamics, a lot of dysfunctionality, a lot of interpersonal politics that come down. We just watched August in Osage County, the movie, old Meryl Streep movie, in which the family, there's a damaged aunt who's just so mean to everyone, and so abusive. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is many people, what they're feeling in their digestion is a lot of the trauma that they're carrying around and the challenge to their digestion. But I can't judge what's physiological and what is...
But I guess the bottom line is when you say felt sense and when Levine says felt sense, it is any physical sensation.
Yep.
So if I have an itch here, because a mosquito bit me, that's part of the felt sense.
We will track that, and you never know where that will lead, you know. We were talking about the felt sense in a group like this, and suddenly this young man says, oh, that's why I've always, my umbilical cord was wrapped around my neck. That's why I always felt like women were strangling me. And whenever he was close to a woman, it was very painful for him. And so he's always struggling in that dynamic in his relationship to women. And a third of the babies are born with that cord around their neck.
I guess where I'm sort of ultimately digging to, right? On a kind of personal, almost selfish level. I've been developing awareness of the body over the last couple of years.
Right.
And I have a decent awareness of physical sensation. But there are subtle things that are much harder to get to. So like the hotel room example is a very good one. Because that gut feeling
Yeah.
what we call intuition in the West,
Yeah.
that's not as crisply isolated as a digestive or
Yeah.
a back pain or as itch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Even though both of them appear in the body, one is truly physical because it has to do with an organ, a muscle, or something else. The other is just more subtle. And then, of course, ultimately we translate this through the mind, and that's where the problems start.
So we're saying that the body's mode of expression is sensation, and we're creating a safe context to listen and give the body a chance to unwind. One of my colleagues was a fellow who had the BB Institute, Ray Castellano, in which they work with birth trauma. And they would take these children who were crawling and give them a pelvis and a baby, and they'd pick up the pelvis and try to communicate their birth trauma. And if you were watching and listening, you'd see, oh, wow, that's what they're doing. Oh, I was breech. Here's how I was stuck. My head was stuck, And they know, and they just don't have the tools. So we're creating a space where your body can express itself through sensation and unwind the trauma and find wholeness. Yeah, so we're simply present, and part of what we do in our presence is we're very juicy. You don't just sit there passively. So here's the client. You really listen. You really lean in. You really open up your eyes. You really open up your ears energetically. You really invite them. And everything they say, you give them feedback through active listening. You repeat it so they know they're being heard, and then you say things like they're learning a new skill. So you want to say, excellent, really good, that's perfect. What you're doing is exactly right, because they're accessing. So you give them a lot of support for that. And you're going to be amazed. In just a minute, they'll be just right into that gut and describing, or right in that heart, right in that throat. Yes?
But as soon as someone articulates a felt sense, it becomes cognitive.
We're just inviting them to be present for the felt sense. Anytime anyone goes into narratives, and we say, and what are you experiencing in your body? We're constantly moving them from any kind of narrative into the bodily felt sense.
So once you have a felt sense in the body, how do you get from that felt sense to the trauma?
We don't have to have a story about it. We're just clearing. So let's say, so this client is telling me she's feeling this tension around her heart. And so I'm just asking her, okay, keep telling me what you're experiencing in the energy and tissue. And they're saying it feels, there's like a shell that feels very hard. And I said, can you breathe into it? And they say, yeah, it's starting to soften. And now what's happening? Oh, it's like the softness is expanding. And now what's happening? Describe the sensations. So they're just describing what's going on physically.
But then how do you get from that description to the trauma?
We never go there. We're not interested in the story. A couple of things. One is called condensed experience. The ego condenses our experience so that, let's say I was watching a couple fight. I had a couple of my students and they were having a big fight. They called me in. So she was fighting with her husband. And I said, what does that feel like? She said, just like when I would fight with my father. And what does that feel like? It feels like when my father blamed me for getting raped because of the way I dressed. And what does that feel like? Oh, it feels like when my mother died because my father's abusive relationship. And we could take that all the way back to the birth trauma, that the body condenses the threat, condenses the experience. So you may think this is about your husband, but you're really recapitulating your relationship to your father, maybe your relationship to an abusive teacher, abusive brother, all the way back. So when you clear the felt sense, it has reverberations to all these levels of holding.
What do you mean by clearing the felt sense? Acknowledging it?
No, the experience that it's safe to be present in the energy and tissue of your body, so that when you breathe into your heart, you're not feeling resistance, you're not feeling tension, you're not feeling disturbance.
So if I have a felt sense, because ever since you started talking about this, my whole body just heated up and I'm sweating and I'm hot. Are you saying that is when I accept it, when I acknowledge it, when I feel safe in it, that's when it will be?
When you're safe to be present in your body, we're saying that the trauma happens when the ego is overwhelmed by an experience and shuts down the tissue. That this is our mammalian brain. And that by experiencing that it's safe to be present in the tissue and energy of our body, we clear the past from the bodily memory. The felt sense shifts. Now, I want to say a couple more things here. Now, the goal of this work is to prevent re-traumatization. Okay? We're very, very careful to prevent re-traumatization because, again, we're not psychotherapists. We're working with healthy people who want to take responsibility, who want to learn a safe skill for self-care. And so as soon as you start to go into an emotional space, we actually stop the session and we draw you out of it. We put you into a fetal position and do contacts that activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So we put you in a fetal position and make a contact on the spinal accessory nerves and on the sacral parasympathetic nerves. And we do a gentle rocking with an emphasis on stillness to take you out of that bodily. So as soon as we're very conservative about this. If there's, a healthy release, there can be tears, but it feels really energetic and positive. But, we're mammals, and we have what we call the sympathetic nervous system, because if something threatens our herd and the other people in our family, our tribe, our herd are threatened, we feel it sympathetically in our own nervous system. That's why we call it the sympathetic nervous system. So if you, while working on a client, start to feel your own nervous system shift, you get fearful thoughts, do I know what I'm doing? Is this okay? Then you immediately put the client, you assume that your sympathetic nervous system is being activated in sympathy with the clients, and you immediately put them in a fetal position, begin the rocking, take them into your hands, take them out of their felt sense experience into your hands, have them breathing. Again, the trauma vortex is losing it, and coming back to your breath is finding it. If necessary, you can invite them to get in touch with their higher guidance, to pray. Okay, so we're very, very conservative to make sure that the work we're doing is not re-traumatizing. Levine also recommends triturating. Triturating is a concept from homeopathy, in which you take one drop of a substance, you put it in a gallon, you shake it up, you take one drop of that, you put it in a gallon, you shake it up, you take one drop of that. You do that 60 times, you have a 60x homeopathic. So Levine, who's working with deeply traumatized people, just works with a little bit at a time, really triturates it, just goes to the safest edge of that holding in the body, and then goes back to what we call a resource. So part of our check-in now is going to change. We're going to be adding a resource to our check-in. Now, the resource is anything that gives you a bodily sense of well-being. So I'm checking in. How are you? How's your body? What's your intention? So she says, my intention is to work with my digestive problems. Okay. So then I say, can you tell me about an environment or a time in your life where you really felt your digestion was really good? What was your bodily experience of feeling like your digestion was really good? And they said, oh, wow, eating gave me energy. I could really relax eating. Yeah. And then what does that mean? Eating gives you energy. What's the bodily feeling of eating giving you energy? I could really relax around eating. What are the sensations that you're describing? So we get them to describe the felt sense of well-being. So that, first of all, it puts them in touch with a felt sense that addresses the problem.
What if someone has something for his or her whole life?
Then we have them fantasize. What would it be like? Okay? Or sometimes say, can you think of a moment in your time, an hour, a day, a week? This woman says, oh yeah, I remember when in the Navy, I was the head of this operation. Everybody came to me. I was significant. I was visible. I was needed. You know, she was dealing with that. What did that feel like in your body? Everyone coming to you for direction. Everyone coming. So, what does that feel like when you're actualizing yourself? What does that feel like in your meditation practice? What does that feel like when you're playing your violin? What is that like when you're walking in the woods with your dog? What's that like when you're in your program doing your PageMaker program? What's it like when you're in your flow? So a resource can be, let's hear Dr. Levine defining a resource.
Everybody has resources. It can be also said that every body has resources. So what are these resources and where do they come from? Well, resources can be anything or anyone that support and nurture a sense of physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. They can be obvious or hidden. They can be active or forgotten. They can be external, internal, or both. Such examples of external resources might be nature, friends, family, animals, a spiritual practice, athletics, dance, movement, tai chi, martial arts, music, and other expressive arts. Examples of internal resources might be strength, agility, intelligence, inherent talents, instinctual wisdom, and resilience of our nervous system. When an external resource, such as listening to a favorite concerto, changes your internal vibration, becomes part of your self-experience, to the point that simply recalling it can change your mood, then it's become an internal resource. When a person has been traumatized, instinctual resources for successful protection and self-defense have been overwhelmed. So, because of that, resources can be lost or forgotten after even one event. And trauma began during the formative years of infancy and early childhood. Few resources may have been available from the beginning. However, even kids who are the most abused and traumatized and neglected find some resource. A tree, an animal, an angel, some kind of spiritual sense. I mean, it's amazing what resources kids find to get through these bad experiences.
This is from Dr. Levine's excellent book, Healing Trauma, which comes with a CD and a whole bunch of exercises for working with yourself and working with other people. Really, really wonderful. Well, you know. We're going to be checking with our client, holding hands, recognizing their divinity, looking into the eyes, the windows of the soul. How's your body? How are you doing emotionally? What's your intention? And now we call this negotiating an intention. because you're going to help them to articulate a stronger or powerful intention. If their intention is, you might negotiate the intention and help them strengthen the intention, identify a more empowering intention. And then, once we hear of often they'll be describing a problem, then we're involved in what we call negotiating a resource. So I'll often do what I just now. Can you remember a time in your life where you felt loved, when you didn't feel abandoned, when you felt healthy, when you felt sexy, when you felt prosperous, did I say healthy? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Can you get in touch with a time when you felt well-being, when you felt safety? And it can be just a day, a week, a month, a season. And, they'll say, oh yes, before my parents' divorce, or yeah, before we moved to California, before we moved from the old neighborhood. And then you get them to articulate the felt sense of that space as well as you can. And then now this is a resource, both it introduces them to an experience of well-being on a cellular level, and also that you will use if the session starts to go south. You put them on a fetal position, and you'll do the parasympathetic energizing, and you'll ask them, take deep breaths. Can you picture yourself back in that tree that you love so much in the backyard, and in the old home that you loved so much before you moved, and what's it like for you to be in that tree? So you bring them into their own experience of safety and well-being. Now again, sometimes we'll have someone dealing with loneliness or abandonment, and I'll have them do a visualization in which they're picturing what someone who is successfully in a successful relationship feels like. Okay, give them that option of what do you feel like if you were them? What would that feel like for you? What would success in relationship feel like in your body, etc. So you give them that option, and you want to understand whatever you're doing with your client is guided by higher intelligence, and it's a creative process. So, okay, great. Pretty soon I'm going to do a couple demos. I'll demo on Chayla. I'd like to demo on Lindsay, Rachel. A couple people have asked me for sessions, and do see how things go. Okay, great. Yeah.
Would you say that for everyone who experiences a felt sense that is disturbing in some way or another, has an underlying trauma associated with it?
Again, I don't know or care. I'm just facilitating the person's being safe in their body. Because sometimes you're coming up against past life memories and past life trauma. Sometimes you're coming up with family, intergenerational stuff, There's no way in which you can really tell a story that does justice to what's the karmic forces that are going on. So I'm not terribly interested in the cognitive. What I'm interested in the client feeling safe and energized and joyous and alive and whole. And what I know, it's just a real rush to be with them and to do this. It's just very joyous to, because what we're dealing with is this contraction in your neck is where you didn't feel safe to speak to your mother, your father, and sometimes that went down, we're tracking it down into your heart or down into your gut or into your pelvis, that pelvic inflammatory disease is rooted to an abortion where you didn't feel supported, where he didn't come with you like you needed, and so there is a contraction of your whole water chakra on the left side. So, and yeah. So I'm not here to create another story or to encourage another story, because we're all trapped in our story in such profound ways. And our stories become these big operas of my suffering with casts of thousands. And so I'm not...
Well, let's say there's no story associated with this felt sense. Do you believe there's a trauma related to it?
I'm just facilitating sensation-based awareness that it's safe to be present in your body. Most people find that very liberating because it's a form of soul retrieval. Your soul is your presence. Think about when you fall in love with someone, how there's this test of safety there and test of vulnerability. You just... the New York Times had an article, these questions you could answer, it's develop intimacy, that you could create fall in love in under 12 hours by answering these questions, that they created a level of vulnerability and intimacy that most people... But, you know, a loving relationship is so hard because we have to risk our vulnerability. And this experiment in which you create safe to be vulnerable. A successful relationship is one where you're safe to be vulnerable. And Shayla had to chant for years, I'm not your brother, as I experience these things. Because what we do in the safety of a loving relationship is we start to reenact our trauma. We start to make them the victim as a way, and so they can experience what it was like to be a victim. So they could experience our witness our victimhood. And so personal relationships, loving relationships are so challenging because we're risking being vulnerable and there's so much projection there as we attempt to create safety. So I'm just trying to talk about the layers of pain that are there for us in the simplest, most natural, most universal things like trying to love. And think about what we reenact with our children sometimes. I saw myself slap my son and say, wow, what did I do? And never touched him again after I saw myself, you know. Because I grew up in an environment where it was normal to chase your kid around the house with a strap. Good old school. While today, you know, someone calls social services for that. I'm just feeling my own trauma as I say these things, you know, and I'm sure that this is activating your own trauma in the safety of this space, that you're all been pretty activated. We're going to have a lot of fun today.
Isn't there a piece where you track felt sense? Maybe that's the piece that...
Yeah, so what can happen is the track, you know, let's say you start in that gut feeling, and then the body takes you on a journey. That's what happened with me with that soldier, where the body took us on a journey of sensation. And in 45 minutes, we went back to his birth trauma. And I was just having him track the sensations, report the sensations. There's no way we consciously... What are you experiencing in the... Not feeling. What are you experiencing now in the energy? What sensations are you aware of? We stay away from the word feeling. What sensations are you aware of in the energy and tissue of your body? Now it's happening. And you'll be amazed at how good people are at tracking this and how easy and natural and available it is.
Okay, I have a question. So
Great.
when you first met with him and you were active listening and going through asking
Yep.
the questions, did he tell you about the
No,
birth
we didn't
trauma?
have I don't remember
So
what the
was it-
intention was, or no, there was nothing
So
about that.
There was no stories
No,
involved
there
with
was
that,
no
or the guy that couldn't digest food for 15 years,
No,
10 years.
no,
He never
no.
told you any of that. That came
No,
out through the
that,
session. So
yeah.
you guys were talking, he was talking through what he was experiencing during the session versus like when we've been doing it. Some of us have just been going completely out. This one's a little bit more of an almost active, awake session where you're giving feedback and kind of talking through it.
No, I understood what happened to that boy years later when I found out about his environment. He ended up becoming a cook at Hartwood and learning how to create a really, you see, learning how to create nourishing food and a nourishing eating experience.
Got it.
And I got to know him and understood what that was. I'm not sure what that soldier's intention was. He's a very sophisticated guy, done years of hypnotherapy, past life regret, all that stuff, trying to get at it, And again, what we're doing is we're empowering the body's wisdom to speak through its language, which is holding, which is sensation, okay? We're creating a safe space for the body to speak. Now, let's leave it in the body's language. Let's not try to translate it into our language. We're not doing justice to it.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is this in any way somewhat similar to like during EMDR, they have you kind of like feel it, like what color is it, what
Yep.
shape, whatever.
Yep. Exactly the same thing. That's another one of the somatic therapies that has emerged out of Gemlin's profound shift of psychotherapy into the body. In phenomenology, whatever you experience is real, okay? We're not here to judge it. The father of naive phenomenology, it's called, was a Harvard anthropologist, Garfunkel. And one of his students was Carlos Castanedas. For years, anthropologists have been going into a village and trying to fit what was going on into their model. And with naive phenomenology, Carlos Castanedas was able to go in the village and simply listen and learn and trust the reality of the experience. Do you hear? So in naive, we're taking this approach of naive phenomenology in which whatever the client experiences is real for them. We're in no position to judge it, and we just work with whatever the client presents. Secondly, is the unarguable validity of one's own experience. We go through life with parents invalidating our experience, lovers invalidating our experience, friends invalidating our experience, superiors at work invalidating our experience. So part of the safety is the unarguable truth of your own experience. So before we make a contact on someone's buttock, we ask permission, or before you do that hug, you ask permission, and you grok what the energy feels like. Because part of people who've been violated or traumatized is they haven't been given the space to say no. So if you ask to hug someone, you need to tune into their energy. And if you feel that reflected in your sympathetic nervous system, you feel that reflected in your energy, you just pull back, you don't hug. You hear that? So you need to be in your field and sensitive to what's going on in your field. The same thing when we make that parasympathetic contact on the buttock, it's just on their hip, just on the side of their sacrum. We ask, may I make a contact on your buttock? And and you feel the energy. Though most people are pretty whole and usually able to say yes, but feel the energy. If they say yes, but you feel a no there, then you have something to work with. Then you work with that. And what are you experiencing as you tell me yes? What are you experiencing in your body? What are the sensations in your body? And you have something really, really valuable to track. Okay. So I feel like at this point I'd like to do a demo. And during the course of today, I'd like to do a couple of demos. So you just see how easy and available and quick this can be.
It's much easier if you see it
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
if he keeps talking about it.
So what are the qualities of the sensation? What sensations are you experiencing? The energy and tissue of your body. What are the qualities? Where does it begin and end? How big is it? What's its color, its shape, its texture? It doesn't matter what question you ask. You're just getting them to focus their awareness in the felt sense. You hear that? Don't say, I don't know what to say, because it doesn't matter what you ask. Just keep them focusing. Okay. Now, another thing that Dr. Gemlin emphasizes is in the focusing, you want to really support them in taking their time and getting the right word to describe what they're experiencing, okay? Until they really feel comfortable with how they're languaging it. Great.
You have people that are like overthinking it too much, and
Well, you constantly say, because people are going to try to go in the narrative. And I'll say, and give you an emotion, you'll say, and what is the bodily correlate of that emotion, of that feeling? What are the actual sensations of? The thing that's going to amaze you is how good people are at tuning into the felt sense. And again, what you're going to be doing is saying, great, excellent, what you're doing is perfect. You're really doing well. That's just exactly what you're looking for. Good job. You're giving them a lot of juice for learning this new skill.
Let the grace of God bless man and every woman in this land. Stay strong, keep your faith alive. Whatever comes to meet us, know the darkness won't defeat us. Stay strong and keep your faith alive. Some say the end is coming to set our souls running, but I say, stay strong and keep your faith alive. Let's all come together, take care of each other. Stay strong and keep your faith alive. Raise your hands in the air. Stay strong and keep your faith alive. Take a stand, say a prayer.